have to be really intentional about putting a team together.
Crawled out of the pound and started screaming.
How good is Joey Bosa?
Herbert, rolling, looking, throwing, end zone, touchdown. It's intercepted. Derwin James. Derwin was there.
You got to be on a mission every day in the NFL. But even more than that, you got to be on a mission together.
Great hands, Keenan Allen.
The Los Angeles Chargers select Rashawn Slater.
Asante Samuel Jr.
Stop! Oh, I'm stopping y'all boys. I can't catch it.
Intercepted. Picked up by Michael Davis.
Explosion. Explosiveness from Eckler.
There's RP4. He blew that up, didn't he? It is picked off. Nasir Adderley. 50-50 ball is 100%. Mike Williams.
Ojena Nwosu. And that will end it.
Time to bolt up.
Welcome to another edition of Chargers Unleashed. Jake Hefner and Dan Wolkenstein here with you from the LA Football Network. Today's show, of course, is being brought to you by UFC FIt in Temecula, Brewery X in Anaheim, and Charger Bolt family. Dan, as we are just coming off the emotional, high-powered Monday Night Football victory, Chargers over the Raiders currently sit atop the AFC West at 3-1. Short time to celebrate because I'm about to utter a sentence that we haven't heard of, maybe never heard of, but we have a very big game against the Cleveland Browns coming to town. This is going to be a very interesting game. Lots of matchups to break down, both on the offense and defensive side of the ball. But yeah, Brandon Staley always talked about, especially this last week, how are they going to respond to an emotional victory, referencing the Kansas City game? Then you go to Oakland, you have a very, very convincing win, 28-14. Now, how are you going to respond when Cleveland comes to town? So, again, lots of storylines that we need to cover. Dan Wolkenstein, how are you feeling about this week?
I am feeling good. To be honest, of all of the weeks, of all the games we've had these last three, I think this one scares me more than last week. We're going to get into some of the statistics and some of the things, but this Cleveland Browns
Dan Wolkenstein, optimist degree?
Hey, I'm not saying I'm not optimistic, but I'm saying I'm tempering expectations and bringing people down to earth a little bit in terms of like what is actually going to be unfolding on Sunday. But look, this is an exciting matchup, like you said, 2 3-1 teams battle for the top of the AFC and AFC West for us to keep in mind. And it's a big deal. And this is a really good matchup, in my opinion, one of the best matchups of the week, and a barometer for what I think Chargers fans are looking for in terms of, is this team for real? You know, everybody talked about last week, we handled success with the Chiefs. How are we going to go back to back? We find a way to get the win at SoFi against the Raiders. Now what? It doesn't get any easier. This Browns team is legit. Their offensive line, their offense, especially the running game, is no joke. Their defense is ridiculous. And so as we get through this is going to be a tough challenge. But I think one that this Chargers team led by Brandon Staley and Justin Herbert and company are up for. So we're going to get into Browns offense versus the Chargers defense, and we'll flip it over to the Chargers offense versus the Browns defense, get into the keys to the game. Then, of course, we'll get into a voicemail we actually got, Jake, that I think you're going to be excited for. And then finally, the predictions. So, Jake, let's just get after it. Browns offense, Chargers defense. You got Baker Mayfield, Kareem Hunt, Odell Beckham Jr., Nick Chubb. How are you feeling with this matchup going against the likes of Derwin James, Joey Bosa, Drew Tranquil, Nasir Adderley, and team?
You know, there's been a lot of scrutiny on Baker Mayfield over these past 4 weeks. And understandably so, when you look at the stats for him, they have not been particularly good. Again, Baker Mayfield's only thrown 2 touchdown passes so far for throughout the first 4 weeks. I think that's second.
Which is crazy.
Worst.
That's not good.
Yeah, which is nuts when you think about the offensive weapons that are around him. Second worst in the NFL as far as passing touchdowns goes for that offense. The Chargers are going to try, and let me emphasize that word, try, to put this game in Baker Mayfield's hands. You had Odell Beckham Jr. coming back. Even last week, we saw it against in Minnesota. The connection wasn't there. There were underthrows. There were missed throws from Baker to Odell. You're not going to have Jarvis Landry for this game, which in my opinion could be a huge break for the Chargers. Schwartz, though, if you paid attention to what happened with Henry Ruggs this past Monday against the Raiders, that could be something that the Browns try to exploit as far as the Chargers secondary goes. But Dan, this game is all going to be won in the trenches. And this game, of course, brings up the biggest worry that I've been talking about with this team for months, and it is this power of this interior defensive line. And so far, it ranks 29th in the league against the rush. And you are going up against the number one rushing offense in the league in the Cleveland Browns with two extraordinarily dynamic running backs in Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt. Kareem Hunt, who has a history of running well against the Chargers, could start on anybody's team right now. And you pair him with the 1-2 punch of Nick Chubb. This is just, it's going to be a huge, huge test. Do not take what you saw on Monday's game against the Raiders as a positive step forward as far as this rushing games goes, because the Chargers did what they had to do offensively. They basically took away the Raiders' running game by scoring points and doing it consistently and doing it quickly to where the Raiders had to completely abandon the run game. You're not going to see that against this team on Sunday. If Cleveland Browns know how to put together a formula, the first thing they're going to look for is how to exploit their matchups with their offensive line, which is very good, and seeing what matchups that they can exploit against the interior of this Chargers defense. I look at this, Dan, as a very close replica of how the Dallas Cowboys approached their game against the Chargers. It was all Zeke and Tony Pollard in that game. Dak Prescott really didn't have to do that much. Threw for 277, had 9 stats, didn't even have to throw a touchdown. And they ended up, what was it, Dan? It was just, around just 100 yards in the first quarter alone that Dallas ran on us? I mean, it was insane. So I'm thinking that this is going to be a very similar game plan, especially with, the torn labrum that Baker Mayfield's dealing with in his shoulder.
And Odell.
There you go. So I think they're going to put this game strictly on both Chubb and Hunt's backs and try to take him to the promised land and get a victory strictly off the running game.
If there was a week to enable Jake's pessimism to be on full display and fears across all of Chargers land, this is the week. And you mentioned it. For as much flack as we give Baker Mayfield and whether or not he should be getting an extension or if he's the right quarterback for that team, like right now, they don't really need a quarterback. You and I could be the quarterback, and they would be just fine. They are relying on their rushing game, and their rushing game is no joke. Jake, they are the number one rushing offense in the NFL, averaging almost 178 yards a game.
Second 4 straight games with 150 or more yards rushing. Let's not knock this. It's coming consistently. It's not coming in big chunks and spurts sporadically. It's coming consistently.
Yeah, and so when we look at some of these statistics I'm about to go over, think about like what the Chargers are good and bad at on defense and what the Browns are good and bad at on offense. We'll kind of put both these together at the end. So they average second most time per drive on offense. Both of their running backs, Kareem Hunt and Nick Chubb, average 5.4 and 5.2 yards per carry. Both are in the top 11, which is ridiculous. That said, their offense in terms of passing is not good. They're ranked, I think, 25th. And the part that I do want you to consider, Jake, as a glimmer of optimism, is they've actually allowed 12 sacks, which is 7th most in the entire NFL. So their offensive line is not looking very good. And Jedrick Wills looks to be a little hurt, so he might be shaken up. And a lot of folks in Browns land are actually wanting him to sit out a week. Now you flip that over, right? So essentially, not much passing attack. They're not scoring touchdowns through the run or through the pass. It's all through the run, but their running game has been very good. You look at the Chargers defense, right? 5th most rushing yards allowed in the NFL and 3rd worst allowed yards per run at, I think it's like 5.3. So best offense in terms of rushing, worst defense, arguably, one of the worst in terms of rushing defense. That's a recipe for success for the Browns. Now, if you hear a lot of people say, "Oh, this could be a shootout," and to be honest, I kind of like the idea of it being a shootout because I like our chances with our offense or our defense from a passing perspective versus their passing offense. Chargers defense, 5th most takeaways in the entire NFL, which hallelujah, thank you, Derwin James. 5th best in passing defense. which is 192.5 yards a game, which is awesome. 6th most pressures, 4th fewest missed tackles, which when's the last time you got to say that, Jake? 4th fewest tackles.
It's been a minute since we said a stat like that.
Yep. So when you think about the end result, scoring defense, Chargers are actually ranked 7th with only allowing 18.5 points per game. In my opinion, the keys, the ability for the Chargers to shut down or at least contain the Browns' rushing game is the single most important priority. If we can do what we did to the Raiders, I am feeling mighty fine about this game. This is a whole different matchup, though. Nick Chubb, Kareem Hunt is very different than what we saw versus the Raiders. So their offense and their strengths actually match up very well to our defense and our weaknesses, just being honest. So in terms of, like, one of those things has to improve or go bad. Either Browns don't rush a lot or Chargers somehow miraculously figure it out. Otherwise, Chargers defense is in for a long day with long drives, and they're going to be gassed by the time the fourth quarter comes.
Yeah, and I mean, again, my question is, how do you stop it? You know, you take away the Raider game, and I still have said since the season started, I'm worried about the trends. And the biggest trends for me at the last time that I brought this up, Dan, which was just following the Dallas Cowboys games, it was the efficiency of the red zone offense. Thankfully, that looks like over the last 2 weeks, that's definitely been corrected. But the rushing defense, what I've come to figure out is that this is not getting it better anytime soon. Okay, this is not something that's magically going to be fixed. I was ecstatic to hear the news, even with Justin Jones being put on short-term IR, that the man that I have been advocating for so long from an undrafted free agent standpoint, Forrest Merrill, I called him Bowling Ball 66 when he was still signed to the practice squad, but now he's changed his number. I think it was 91, Dan, if I remember correctly. And now that he's on the active roster, he's now been promoted to Wrecking Ball 91. So no longer Bowling Ball 66. It's now Bowling Ball 91. I know in the 3 plays that he played in, he made a substantial difference to those plays that were actually happening. But I still don't see.
Both look good. Yep.
Yes, definitely. I just still need to see it again. And again, this is probably the biggest task that you're going to face all season when it comes to, what can your rushing defense sustain against? This is going to be the biggest test all year when you're talking about guys like Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt. So it does scare me. It does scare me from a standpoint that Baker Mayfield does not have to do much in order to win games. As we said, the Cleveland Browns have consistently, over the first 4 weeks, have put up 150 yards rushing or more through the first 4 weeks. Baker does not have to do a lot. This team on Cleveland, as it stands right now, is operated through their run game and their defense. So, like I said, I see a very similar game plan that could be implemented against this Chargers defense. And if I were the opposing coach, I would be looking right to that interior defensive line and seeing every which way that I could exploit this matchup.
Yeah, you hear a lot of people talking about it being like a shootout. I just don't see it. If I'm the Cleveland Browns, I don't want to get into a shootout. I don't think I could sustain that.
I want a muddy game.
Yes. I want a muddy game if I'm Cleveland.
I will agree with that. I see it being very low scoring. I don't see any team going over 21 points.
21's low. I wouldn't say no more than 24. Over under, I'd say like 49. I'd pick the under for sure.
Okay, fair enough. But yeah, I don't see this as a shootout game. I think it'll be more prolific than Cleveland's game against Minnesota that ended in 14-7. But yeah, I'm with you. I don't see this to be a shooting game. I see this as like a back and forth chess match.
Yep. So in short, Chargers defense, I think versus the pass is going to be great or very good at minimum. Versus the rush, that's the biggest question mark. Now when we flip it, and you look at Chargers offense, Justin Herbert, Keenan Allen, Austin Eckler, Mike Williams, all the tight ends, offensive line, versus the Browns defense. I don't think people understand or appreciate how freaking good this defense is for the Browns. Like, you look at some of their stats, Jake, and you see a lot of 1s, 2s, 3s, 4s, and 5s in the league in lots of things. How do you see, like, the Chargers offense? Either one, I guess both. How do you see the Chargers offense attacking the Browns defense? And do you think it will be successful, or how should it be successful?
This will be such an interesting matchup. Again, I still think that this starts in the trenches because everybody's eyeballs goes immediately to Myles Garrett, who currently leaves the NFL with 6 sacks. You have Jadeveon Clowney, who I think benefits a hell of a lot from having a guy like Myles Garrett opposite him, to where they can both get wins along the offensive line. We'll see how long the matchup between Myles Garrett and Rashawn Slater lasts. It may not last long because Max Crosby may have took 2 or 3 snaps before he decided to flip over to Storm Norton's side. But we'll see what ends up happening on that. Again, this is going to dictate the entire pace. Now, to Cleveland's credit, defensively for them, they are allowing the second fewest yards per game this season with 250.3. But now, let's look at this objectively. Since their Week 1 defeat against the Kansas City Chiefs, they have gone up against the Houston Texans, who had just lost Tyrod Taylor, who had to start a backup quarterback. You've gone up against this past week in Minnesota with Kirk Cousins. And then why am I blanking on? Oh, how could I forget? Chicago Bears. And everybody knows what happened in that game. Poorly executed game plan by Matt Nagy. Terrible game to debut your rookie first-round pick in Justin Fields in. So, yeah, their last 2 games, their defenses felt great because they've held their opponents to 7 and 6 points respectively. And yes, it makes sense that they're the second fewest yards total at 250 a game. But I think that Justin Herbert and this offense, if Justin Herbert is awarded the time, see Kansas City, see Washington, see aspects of this past Monday against Oakland. Unfortunately, let's not reference the Dallas game because we all know what happened in that game. He was under duress the majority of that game. If it's not a repeat of the Dallas game, and give it to Cleveland, man. Their guys on their defensive line, along with their edge rushers, are nasty, and they can figure out ways to stop the run too. They've done a pretty good job at that. If they can give Herbert a clean pocket, I feel like they're going to be able to exploit matchups. Now, what we saw on Monday night with this being the Jared Cook, Donald Parham, Steven Anderson show, that was great. I don't think that you're going to see that this time. I actually think it's going to be more of the Keenan Allen to Mike Williams type show that we're more accustomed to seeing. Cleveland, despite everything, is still, I think, 6th fewest in just overall, if you want to look at it from a fantasy perspective, on points that they give up or production that they give up to tight ends. So I think they're going to do whatever they can to take that away from them. But here is where I think is going to be a huge advantage, Dan. And this is not so much for the Chargers. It's more from a coaching perspective. Shortly after Brandon Staley was hired, Chargers started, or not Chargers, but us in general started looking towards free agency. And we said everything with like, oh, the Leonard Floyd connection from the Rams, or this guy and this guy and this guy from his previous coaching regimes. It all just makes sense. There's 2 guys that currently sit in the Cleveland Browns secondary that I know that a lot of Charger fans thought it would be a great acquisition. You have Troy Hill, previously played with under Brandon Staley in the Rams defense there, and safety John Johnson. Now, I would have to believe
Little birdie
that Brandon Staley knows a thing or two about both of those guys. And as of today, latest injury report, Troy Hill has a toe injury, did not practice. We don't know what game status that's going to happen. I don't believe that that's going to keep him out. Denzel Ward is also did not practice with a neck injury. But these 2 guys specifically, John Johnson and Troy Hill, I have a feeling that Brandon Staley has a thing or two as far as knowing what their defensive tendencies are going to be. Yes, they're in a different system. They're not in Staley's system anymore. But just as far as what they like to do and how they like to cover, I have a feeling that Brandon Staley's in both Keenan Allen and Mike Williams' ear to say, hey, this is how we can exploit this offense.
Yep. Yeah, and this Cleveland Browns defense is star-studded, man. I mean, John Johnson, Troy Hill, you mentioned it. They got Greg Newsome, Greedy Williams, Denzel Ward. I mean, their secondary is legit. And then they got one probably up for Rookie of the Year, Jeremiah Wissakoramoa, has been amazing on the edge, just all around all over the field. Obviously, their defensive line, Clowney, Garrett, the whole nine. Their defense is tough, man, and I think that's where they kind of hang their hat. And when you look at kind of these matchups between like what their strengths are and what the Chargers' strengths are, I think that's going to be where this game is won and lost. So we talk about the Browns defense and how good they are, but listen to some of these numbers. And I know in context, you have to go no context, and some of the teams like playing against the Texans and the Bears like isn't much, but like the numbers aren't lying. Like this is true. You can only do as much as you play against. They've only had 3 takeaways all year. For as good as their defense has been, they've only had 3 takeaways, which I think is big. They're not really opportunistic from the defensive perspective. But in terms of like yards allowed per game, rushing yards, passing yards, like they're legit. Like second fewest total yards allowed in the NFL, third fewest rushing, third fewest of passing, second in knockdown percentages, the quarterback, second most sacks, fourth in pressures. Like, that's hard to beat. That's hard to beat. But if you look at the Chargers offense, sixth in passing, fifth fewest sacks. So again, strength on strength. Strength for Chargers, not giving up sacks. Defensive line for the Browns are giving sacks. Chargers offensive line doing great in terms of average time per drive, giving him clean pocket. Second most yards per drive in the entire NFL for the Chargers. Fifth and third down percentage, which almost 50%, which is amazing. Our boy Justin Herbert, former Rookie of the Year, third most first downs through the air with already 62. Only trails Mahomes and Tom Brady, which is a good spot to be in. Surprisingly, Jake, they actually have the 5th best starting field position. So if the Chargers can keep taking advantage of field position and actually get into the red zone and finish, they'll be in good shape. The problem that the Chargers have is they can be one-dimensional. Now, the Austin Eckler performance we saw last week did help these numbers a bit, but are still middle of the road in rushing yards per game at 16th, 17th in yards per rush. Although, weirdly enough, Austin Eckler is like 7th in the NFL with 5.7 yards per carry. So, like, get him the ball more, please. They're middle of the pack in rushing, top 10 in most categories when it comes to passing. But the thing that is worrisome to me, and I know the last couple of weeks we've seen some improvements. Jake, the Chargers, even with the last improvements these last few weeks in the red zone, are still 23rd in red zone percentage at just 55%. Only 11 of 20 have ended up in touchdowns. And you gotta finish. And we're trending in the right direction. So I don't want to temper. I'm going to temper fears a little bit, but they are giving up very few yards on both passing and rushing. I would assume that that rushing number is probably going to hold true more than that passing number. I think our passing number is going to look just fine because I don't think they've been tested much. As much as I like their secondary, I'll take our guys all day. I think there's mismatches all over the field for our playmakers. I think Mike Williams is a mismatch. Keenan Allen's a mismatch. Eckler out of the backfield is a mismatch. Both tight ends are a mismatch. Like, there are wins there. So, good on good. Chargers offense, Browns defense. Chargers offense have gone up against some legit teams. Now, what you could argue, Raiders defense isn't the greatest. Gus Bradley, I think, actually had a pretty darn good game for as much as we talk flack about him. The Chiefs defense isn't all, I mean, everyone knows their defense is suspect, but like, you're still going against the Chiefs. The Cowboys defense is now looking pretty darn good. Washington is admirable. I don't think the offenses that this Browns team have gone up against are anything like what they're about to see. So I give the Chargers offense the edge over the Browns defense. in totality. Their defense against the run is very good, but like that's a strength versus something we don't necessarily have to rely on as much. So I'm not as worried about that. I think we're going to cook from a passing perspective.
Yeah, I mean, it makes sense, Dan. I mean, I get everything that you're saying. I mean, realistically, the Cleveland Browns should be 4-0 team right now. They should have won that game in Kansas City if it wasn't for the self-inflicting injuries. Or, excuse me, mistakes. Not injuries, mistakes. But how about this for an interesting stat, Dan? Well, not necessarily a stat, but just a storyline. We all know about the revamp of the Chargers offensive line and how quickly that has actually been an improvement, not just for Justin Herbert, but obviously you look at this last week for this running game. Rashawn Slater, Matt Filer, Ode Abuche, Corey Linsley, 4 out of the 5 guys that were not here last year. And now you look at a Cleveland Browns defensive line that has a very, very similar storyline because 4 of their top 5 defensive linemen are brand new additions. Jadeveon Clowney, Tack McKinley, Malik Jackson, Malik McDowell, who I was a very huge advocate about coming out of college. And these guys have already begun to gel very, very quickly. A lot of these guys are getting after the run game, as you said. It's not just a Jadeveon Clowney and Myles Garrett coming off the edge that's getting to the quarterback. So the storyline really to me, again, is who's going to win in the trenches? This new group of 4 for the Chargers or this new group of 4 for the Cleveland Browns? And that's going to dictate the pace because to your point, Dan, yes, Cleveland Browns over the last 3 weeks have not been tested really since Patrick Mahomes in week 1. This is your best quarterback matchup since then. And for us, having a guy like Justin Herbert, thank God that if the running game's going to get stopped, which I definitely believe it will, you have to put this game, this is going to be another game where you have to put this on Justin Herbert's shoulders, which if we go off of pass, that's okay to feel like that. But again, if the pocket is not clean, Justin Herbert has been great over the past 2 weeks. 7 touchdowns to 0 interceptions. If the Chargers offensive line comes to play and keeps a clean pocket for him, then Dan, I'm with you. This should be easy matchups to exploit for this defense. I think they're going to get theirs. But if you're forcing Herbert into making bad decisions, if you're hurrying him to make, throws that end up going to incomplete, then this is going to be much more of a closer matchup, I think. Like you said, it's not going to be a blowout. Both teams are going to get theirs. I think it's going to be highly contested. You're going to see a 3-and-out here, a 3-and-out there. Like I said, I don't see any team scoring above 21 points in this game. I think it's more of a 2017 type of affair. But this game is really going to be dictated on both sides of the ball for both teams because it's the trenches is everything. And when I look at it, we go back to the Browns offense versus the Chargers defense. That's the biggest weak point I see as it relates to the trench defense or the trench weakness, as far as how this game is going to go and be dictated.
So keys to the game. So I think we have it as who can win in the trenches, which I think, to be honest, is a keys to the game for every game.
Yes.
But I think specifically
this one in particular, yes.
In this one in particular, it's the interior defensive line for the Chargers versus the rushing offense of the Chiefs, correct?
Correct. You look at the rest of the Chargers schedule. I know that we were talking up a bunch in week 1, with the Chase Young, Montez Sweat, and the Washington football team's front 7. You look at it now, in retrospect, if they can put up a repeat performance on how they handled them, great. I'm not going to go as far as to assume that. But this right now is arguably the biggest test that the Chargers are going to have from a front 7 standpoint for the remainder of the year.
Yep, I agree.
I don't see them facing a defensive line and edge rushers like the ones that are coming from the Cleveland Browns.
No, I agree. So I'm kind of thinking of this like keys of the game in terms of like the things that I'm going to sound the alarm for. Like the things that the Chargers need to kind of watch out and Chargers fans need to watch out for. So one, you mentioned it, their rushing offense versus our interior defensive line. Another one is, I know that our offensive line so far has been pretty darn good. Our tackles / Storm Norton and tight end / running back, like
tackle and a half.
They've got to do their job. And conversely, the Browns are not going to be passing much, in my opinion, I would presume. But if they do, we have to get home. Like, we have to get home. And so, yes, Joey Bosa has to perform well, but I can rely on Joey Bosa. It's the other guys. Like, will Drew Tranquil get in there? Like, can we get more of Jerry Tillery? Like, can Kaiser White continue to fly around? Because if you think about it, like, Derwin James, like, it's weird to say this, Jake, but it almost feels like a lot of our defensive, like, playmakers are kind of, like, not wasted, but we have a superfluous amount of them compared to what we're going up against. And so you hear Brandon Staley talk about physicality. I think that's going to be what wins this game. Whichever team can be more physical, specifically. You saw a lot of like highlight tapes of the Raiders-Chargers game last week where you saw the Chargers just beating up on the Raiders, whether it's offensive line, wide receivers, running backs. It's going to be that kind of game. So look for physicality. And again, if it's a low-scoring game, low meaning like low 20s each side, the chances of the Chargers losing this game are much higher, in my opinion. The higher the score, the better the chances are the Chargers win this game. Any other keys that you see?
You're talking offensively or defensively or both here?
Both. This is keys the entire game. What will dictate who wins and loses?
It's as simple as you're gonna Let's just get the cat out of the bag right now. You're gonna hemorrhage in the run game. There are gonna be big runs from both Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt. Let's just expect that right now because it's going to happen.
And I want to temper real quick. Hold that thought. That very well may also be by design for the Chargers, where they might do like the giving the 2 to 5 yard runs, but nothing more. And like if they could do the nothing more part, I'm fine with it. It's when you get gashed like we did with Pollard and Zeke, then it's a problem.
That's what I'm expecting to happen, Dan. They're going to get theirs. Can you clamp down in the red zone? That's another big question, but they're going to get theirs. I guarantee you're going to see runs like that because of the guys that they have front making holes for them. And the consistency of this Cleveland Browns running game with these two guys back there, they're going to get theirs. So let's just get it out of the way and expect it. With Baker Mayfield playing the way he is, with his shoulder injury, with his inaccuracy over the last couple of weeks, and with the Chargers, I'm sure they're going to do whatever they can to pressure him, to get him off his snide on the times that he does pass. On the flip side, Dan, again, this is a trench game, plain and simple for both teams. On the flip side of that, if this Chargers offensive line can give Justin Herbert a clean pocket, as we said, if you take both quarterbacks between as far as what to be feared more in the passing game, Justin Herbert or Baker Mayfield, it's Justin Herbert all day long. They're going to do whatever they can to take the running game and Austin Eckler out of this game, put it on Justin Herbert's shoulders. But if you can give him a clean pocket, to me, it changes the entire dynamics of this game because the weapons that you have, I think Brandon Staley is going to be able to look at this defensively and exploit a bunch of matchups. But again, it starts and stops with a clean pocket. You cannot have a repeat of the duress that Justin Herbert was under in the Dallas game. Jadeveon Clowney and Myles Garrett will probably at least get one sack facing off against Storm Norton. But when that starts to happen, or even just a sniff of a hurry or a quarterback pressure that happens to Justin Herbert, by God, put Donald Parham over there on the right side. Put Jared Cook. Put Steven Anderson. Have Austin Eckler in there as almost a decoy, but just to be there to secure, just to chip someone if they happen to make it through. Do that. Do not wait 2 or 3 series before you finally make that adjustment. That's the only thing I'll say, is that we know Storm Norton's going to have some issues. It's happened already over the last 2 weeks, but just don't wait too long for the wheels to start coming off and for that defense to start getting into a point where, say, we could just pin our ears back and go, and we could figure out a way to get this guy off his snide. Because Justin Herbert, say what you will about him, as cool, calm, and collected as he is under pressure, he's not immune to getting rattled or feeling pressure.
Happened all last year.
It's any quarterback feels that way. So clean pocket for Justin Herbert and being able to somewhat sustain the running attack of the Cleveland Browns. Those are the big takeaways, and those are the biggest things that are going to dictate the outcome of this game.
Now, the one thing, and I don't know if this is blind faith or I don't know if this is smart, but I also want everyone to remember that Brandon Staley is the Chargers head coach. And we've all been scarred for years of seeing our coaching staff putting us in terrible situations and are not adjusting to anything. And we just see the same thing happen over and over and over and over again. It's a different coaching staff. And previous coaching regimes, I don't necessarily know if I would trust to be able to be prepared for what's to come. I don't think Brandon Staley will be outsmarted. It's just a matter of execution. So before we get into like our predictions, Jake, we did get a voicemail. I want to make sure that we get to this. Chargers Unleashed hotline. For folks who are not familiar with it, you have a chance to call into the show, leave a voicemail. Please leave your name and where you're from, because a lot of these don't, and maybe we need to update our voicemail so we can tell people to do that. But give us a call.
You can expect people to leave names after a game like that on Monday. You know, the alcohol is flowing through the veins. The adrenaline's really high. You don't give a shit about leaving your name. You're just like, oh my God, what just happened?
Fair. So if you want to get your voicemail heard and discussed live on the show, give us a call, 323-374-5651. Let's hear what our latest voicemail was. And Jake, I know you haven't heard these before, but this one is kind of more towards the pessimism and making sure that we kind of are a little cautious about how we are excited as a fan base.
I'm glad to know it's not just me.
About this matchup. Let's hear what we have to say.
A new listener to your podcast, and I decided to call in because I know there's a lot of optimism going on in the air right now. And there should be. It's well deserved, right? The Chargers are 3-1. And there's a lot of things to celebrate. There's a lot of things to be happy about. I haven't felt this feeling in a long time, my friends. However, it is in my gut to have to say, I have to kind of bring the energy down and say that I feel like this Cleveland game is one of those trap games. I think it's one of those games where our kicking game needs to be on point. And I think our kicking game is what's going to have to close out this game with a W if we want to take that W home. And so, Vizcaino, you know, I don't know what your name is yet, rookie. You got to prove yourself. Show me that we can win with the kicking game. And so that's all I got to say. I'm putting everyone on high alert. Our kicking game must be on point in this game. And that's because, you know, we have two good defenses going head-to-head. And I really feel like it's going to be one of those scrappy, in the mud, dirty, get your face full of dirt, get kicked in the nuts, that type of game. And so my name is Manny Romero, new listener to the show. I hope you guys have a good rest of your week. Let's go, Bull.
Manny Romero.
See, Dan? I like the fact that he brought up the kicking game because we didn't even talk about the kicking game.
Yep.
If this ends up being somewhat of a low-scoring game, then yeah, it definitely needs to be on point. Give me a repeat of the performance from Vizcaino from Monday night.
By the way, Jake, Chargers are the worst in extra point in the NFL right now.
Does that really shock anybody? As Brandon Staley says, is anybody surprised about what happened? Come on.
Yep.
I mean, like I said, I don't care if Vizcaino's kicking a 56-yarder or a 6-yarder. I'm going to be breathing heavy until that ball sails through the uprights. But yeah, if it ends up being everything, then yeah, you're going to need every aspect. You want to win in all three phases of the game. So absolutely, we didn't talk about the kicking game because it really hasn't been an Achilles heel for us, especially Monday. Yes, yet. Trust me, there's going to be something that we're going to be pissed off about as it relates to number 16 here in not too long of time. But yeah, that's more of the pessimistic view. Again, I'm not saying that he's right. I'm not even saying that I'm right. I'm just saying, like, let's just take a step back and look at everything. I will say this. One thing that I respectfully disagree on with what he said. I do not believe that this is a trap game.
Thank you. I was going to say the same thing.
There's no way that you could look at a team coming in, regardless of who it is that they play with a 3-1 record, and think of it as like a trap game. The next 2 games, much like it was against Kansas City and Oakland, as important those divisional games were, you can't look at the Cleveland Browns or the Baltimore Ravens as a trap game. No, sir. I know it's the Cleveland Browns, but as someone once in Cleveland once famously said, this ain't your daddy's Cleveland Browns anymore. And everybody, I think, has taken notice of that. So I don't think that this Chargers team is going to come in unprepared. But as you said, Dan, it's all about execution at the end of the day.
Manny, thank you so much for calling. Appreciate you. First-time caller. Love it. Feel free to give us a call to the time. Always happy to share these reactions. Yes, I agree with you, Jake. I do not see this as a trap game. I think everyone all preseason, throughout the regular season, at least this first 6 weeks, knew. This first 6 weeks is a gauntlet. Every week is going to be hell. And if we can get out of this first 6 weeks with our chin up high, I think we'll be okay. Do you think Brandon Staley's looking at this like, we're 3-1, we'll just take the pedal off for a bit, we'll just cruise to 3-3, and then we'll kind of see how we are? No. Like, he knows how that goes and what that means. And so I don't think for a second this is a trap game. Now, could it be like an emotional letdown after 2 straight AFC West divisional opponent games? Possibly. And if this was an Anthony Lynn-led team, I would say, watch out. But I just don't see that with this coaching staff. They just seem too focused on specifics and getting their team prepared. And I would be shocked if this team comes out flat. I just don't see that happening. So, unfortunately, in a low-scoring game, you're right, Manny, kicking is important. And I hope that if that's the case, Chargers fans have a lot to celebrate afterwards of this new kicking regime. But yeah, I think all of us have to, and I said at the top, we have to kind of temper our expectations a little bit here. And yes, the Chargers, first in the AFC West, technically first in the AFC, but there are a lot of 3-1 teams who are good. There are 3-1 teams who should be 4-0, arguably. Chargers are 1. But look, so are the Browns. And for as much flack as we want to give their offense in terms of their passing, they're darn good and they have playmakers everywhere. Yes, they're missing Jarvis Landry. Yes, they might be out of an offensive lineman or two. Like, don't think that this Cleveland Browns is your regular old Cleveland Browns, like you said, Jake. If the Chargers can figure out a way to stop their pass rush and can temper and limit, not stop, but just limit the rushing yards, I think the Chargers will be okay. All right, Jake. Final segment here. Prediction time. We need one bold prediction, final score.
One bold prediction and a final score. All right. I don't know. I'm not necessarily saying if this is a bold prediction or not.
Mm-hmm.
God. Okay. A bold prediction would be the Chargers hold the Cleveland Browns rushing attack to under 100 yards. That's too bold. That's just idiotic.
Flaming hot bold.
Yeah, that's not going to happen. So let me pull it back and let me be a little bit more realistic here. I'm looking at all the Chargers offense to Cleveland Browns matchups to exploit. Again, as we mentioned at the top of the show, Cleveland Browns holding opposing offenses to 50 yards per game over the first 4 weeks. But I don't think that that's going to keep someone from hitting pay dirt. I think we didn't get a chance to see a lot of Keenan Allen, Mike Williams on Monday. Didn't need it, but we didn't. But I know a lot of people were asking about it. I think Mike Williams gets back on track this week. I think this is going to be a very similar type of a game. Maybe not output wise, but he's going to get back on track. I think he'll actually have 85 yards and a touchdown. I know that doesn't sound too bold, but when I look at all of these, you know what? Screw it, Dan. Screw it. I'll tell you something that'll be bold and realistic at the same time. If what I said with Justin Herbert and this offensive line, keeping a clean pocket. Again, you haven't seen a quarterback like this since week 1 in Patrick Mahomes. You've gone up against Mills, Fields, Kirk Cousins over the last 3 weeks. If scenario A happens, clean pocket, Justin Herbert goes over 300 yards passing with 3 touchdowns.
300 yards passing, 3 touchdowns. Final score.
Final score. As I said earlier, I think the game plan for the Cleveland Browns is going to be very reminiscent to what it was with the Dallas Cowboys. Run, make Baker Mayfield do the least amount possible. But in the Dallas Cowboy game, the Chargers still had to take into account that they had Dak Prescott under center. You couldn't mentally not prepare for that. Not saying that they don't have to mentally prepare for Baker Mayfield either. But when you look at both quarterbacks from that circumstance, I'd feel a little bit more sketch balls if the Cleveland Browns had Dak Prescott than they do Baker Mayfield, especially with the way both are playing and with the injury and lack of accuracy that Baker's currently going through right now. So with that being said, I think this will come down to a final field goal. 20-17. Pray to the gods, do 5 Hail Marys in the window, whatever it is you need to do as it relates to this Chargers kicking game. Tristan Vizcaino puts it through the uprights at the end of the game to win it 20-17 Chargers.
Jake, who am I talking to?
I don't know, dude. I'm telling you, these first 4 weeks, at least 3 of these first 4 weeks have done something to me. I don't know. Like I said,
I can't think of the last time I saw you have
Brandon
a
Staley
prediction of
could
a win
sell
against
car
a winning team.
insurance to a camel. If he could do that, then somehow he can bring out an optimistic take from me.
How about this for a bold take, Jake? Everyone talks about Myles Garrett, Jadeveon Clowney, susceptible with Storm Norton.
I know where you're going here. This is a fair bold take.
Rashawn Slater has given up 0 sacks all season. I think that number will continue. And I will go one step further, and the Chargers will only give up 1 sack all game. Just one. Definitely won't be against Rashawn Slater.
It's pretty bold against this defensive front.
And in Jadeveon Clowney Myles Garrett will not get 1. That's part of that. Final score, 24-20. Your Los Angeles Chargers end up 4-1. Again, this team is, I believe, winners of 7 of 8. Are riding a nice high right now. Brandon Staley has them working on all cylinders. I think this team's special. I think this team's different. Chargers go to 4-1. And Jake, this is the week. If the Chargers get to 4-1, you're about to see the bandwagon just overflowing with people trying to get tickets to these things. You will not see more hype around a Chargers team if they win this game than any time in 2018, including the playoffs. Arguably since the Chargers went 14-2. That's what's on the line here. And so I don't think this is a trap game. I think everyone knows what's at stake, including ticket sales, SoFi Stadium, the AFC West, the AFC, all of it. Chargers are going to find a way to win 24-20. How do you feel?
It's fair.
So
it's a bold prediction to say that Myles Garrett's not going to get a single sack.
So we got to
definitely think he'll get 1, but
we got to be ready. I will be at the game, Jake, on Sunday. I'll give you some takeaways when I'm there. I'm sure I'll receive a text message or 2.
Oh, you're going to receive probably.
Here we go.
I'll put the line at 5.5 text messages that you're going to receive from me.
Oh man, I'm taking
the under. I'm taking the over.
Oh, there we go. I'm pounding the under. All right, for Jake Hefner, you can find him and his backwards hat and his beautiful beard at Jake T. Hefner. You can find myself on Twitter at Chargers Homer. You can find us on Twitter at LAC_Unleashed. I almost stuttered that. Anywhere you find your podcast, you can find us, as well as please subscribe to us on YouTube. We're getting close to 1,000, which is the magic number. I think we're going to do a giveaway. And guys, gals, have a great rest of the afternoon. Look forward to this game. Embrace what we have right now. Chargers looking different. And we'll talk to you next time on Chargers Unleashed.